Hey, y'all. I love Glen Canyon. Hey, everyone, this is Dawn Kish, and I'm a photographer and lover of wild places. On April 26th, my latest exhibit called Glen Canyon Exposed Now and Then, with my photos and film, and the legendary Tad Nichols film and photography as well, that documented Glen Canyon pre-dawn. So together, we combined our efforts along with Richard Jackson, and we're curating a show together called Glen Canyon Exposed Now and Then. You do not want to miss this part of history, with art and advocacy to Glen Canyon, the heart of the Colorado Plateau. See you there.
Are you interested in composting your kitchen food scraps at home? Do you care about the environment and sustainability? Keeping food waste out of the landfill is one of the most impactful sustainability efforts a household can adopt, but a lot of the time, it isn't possible to have a backyard compost set up. Compost Crowd is the food scraps collection service for Flagstaff, and when you join the crowd, we make it easy for you to start composting. Just like a trash or recycle collection service, you fill up your receptacle throughout the week and then set it out on your collection day. Then we come and swap out your full bucket for an empty, clean one. Once a year, you can even opt to receive 5 gallons of completed compost for your own personal use. We offer bi-weekly and weekly subscription options, and our service area includes Flagstaff, Kachina Village, Fort Valley, and Forest Highlands. When you use the code BeyondFlag at sign-up, we're giving you your first month of service for free. To join the crowd, go to compostcrowd.com/Flagstaff and use the code BeyondFlag. That's BEYONDFLG.
Hi, my name is Sam, and I'm a senior here at Basis in Flagstaff. For my senior project, I've chosen to create a sculpture that relates to various types of phobias people experience. Some of the phobias that will be included are arachnophobia, trypophobia, entomophobia, and many more. I look forward to completing this by May 5th at the absolute latest. As part of my project, I need to create a blog, and I'd love it if you'd be willing to follow along with me, as any feedback and interaction helps me with my project. You can find my blog at basisseniorprojects.com/Flagstaff. Thanks so much for following along, and I look forward to connecting.
Dr. Seeby.
Greetings, Daniel.
Greetings, and unto the blessed day of greetings.
I will receive that into my heart with warmth and kindness,
Yeah,
gratitude, and gratefulness.
and unto thee gratitude.
Yeah, and unto thee also a warm, blessed morning.
Hey, are you a fan of Tiny Desk?
Oh, big time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you catch Chocolate Dropper?
You know, I actually heard about this.
Oh, yeah?
I saw it in my text messages, but I didn't get a chance to open it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Chocolate Dropper. Just dropping it hard
Yeah?
on the Tiny Desk. So we're on that cognitive bias tip, huh?
We are, man. We finished up on that last one.
Yeah. So our last one was the cognitive biases of confirmation bias and desirability or optimism bias.
Yeah.
Right? So
yeah.
confirmation, basically see what we expect, look for information that confirms what we expect. Optimism, desirability is we see what we want.
Yeah.
We believe what we want to believe. Yeah.
I've seen you racking your brain in the back room at work these days, really trying to pick up whether you're seeing what you expect or you want.
Oh, no, I actually don't ever fall into these.
Yeah, I think we established that. So I'm curious, what are you ruminating about then?
Just the essence of life,
I believe that.
the meaning of life.
Yeah.
I think I got it figured out this week.
I was going to ask if we're any closer to figuring out. What do you got?
I'm there.
Okay.
Yeah. It's way too complex, you know?
I believe that.
Yeah. You got to ruminate in a back room for a while. Get that.
Yeah. At least it's comfortable back there.
So this is episode 3. We covered confirmation desirability, and prior to that, we covered fundamental attribution error. And here today, I'm excited.
You are?
We're going to cover the Dunning Kruger Effect.
Oh, dang. What about the Dunning Kruger Effect excites you?
Well, mostly that we're covering it because I think as many people know, this really goes without saying.
Yeah.
But we are a professional, effective, efficient, functional, competent, capable,
Yeah.
overachieving podcast unit. Here.
Duo.
Podcast duo.
I like unit.
Here.
Yeah. Yeah. All of those things suggest that we are a well-functioning, well-oiled unit.
And if there is any podcasting platform medium unit duos out there to cover the Dunning Kruger effect, it'd be us.
Yeah, totally.
Because of how good we are.
Yeah, totally. Because we've been doing this for so long and our expertise just shines through every single episode.
Yeah. And so, apologize that we're saying all this out loud because it's pretty on the surface.
Yeah, we expect everyone to just be able to pick that up.
Well, it's that obvious.
It's that obvious. Okay. Yeah. I believe that.
So
let's do a poll.
Yeah, let's do a poll. How
functioning podcast unit
capable?
Boo-hoo, booyah. Yeah. Functioning podcast unit, boo-hoo, booyah. Beyond flag.
Okay.
Yeah, that sounds good. We're not slipping into the Dunning Kruger effect at all.
No. What is the definition of the Dunning Kruger effect?
Yeah, well, like you mentioned, it's another cognitive bias, but it's where people with limited competence in a particular domain overestimate their abilities. And so basically it occurs when a person with a lack of skills or abilities is unable to recognize their own shortcomings.
That'd be rough.
Yeah, I can't even imagine what that's like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What does the Urban D have to say about this? We haven't visited the Urban D in a minute.
I know, it's fun. Well, there's a whole lot of vulgarities that are used with the Dunning-Kruger effects. I had to kind of like narrow it down to one that might be presentable.
Not quick and nerdy appropriate?
Yeah, not quick and nerdy appropriate. When we load our YouTube things, we have to say whether it's made for kids or not. So, yeah, we're going to make sure it's okay to use.
Okay. Well, why don't you tell us what definition you landed on from the Urban D, and then I'll tell you whether we can indicate it's kids appropriate on YouTube.
Okay, so this one says, this is straight from the Urban D, is that the Dunning-Kruger effect is a term for when a person tells you with absolute conviction how undisputed something is because they read an article or two on the internet that they insist they remember perfectly. So used in a sentence would be like, man, you see Karen, she's Dunning-Krugering all over Facebook again.
Karen just Dunning-Krugering all over Facebook again.
Yeah, so used in a sentence, there's Karen. Dunning-Krugering all over Facebook again.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that would be how to use Dunning-Kruger in a sentence, I suppose.
Okay.
But, Karen might have read an article or two and thinks she knows everything, and so then it's coming across that way on Facebook.
So essentially, the Dunning-Kruger effect is that you don't know what you don't know. It's an individual or system that doesn't know what it doesn't know and overestimates what they do know.
Yeah, exactly. So with that limited knowledge, you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah. Do you have any examples of the Dunning-Kruger effect in action?
Oh, for sure. I would actually go back to that one really highly functioning, highly competent podcast unit in one of their shows called Beyond Flag, where we had interviewed. Do you remember the interview with Emma Wharton?
Phenomenal. So many cool experiences to get such a phenomenal role.
Yeah, totally. Emma was the executive director of Grand Canyon, or is the executive director of Grand Canyon Youth. And she talked about the second year guide syndrome. And so something that she as a director kind of works with is training guides over time and that sort of thing. And she was talking about how second year guides come into that year, often with a lot of confidence because they did it once.
Yeah.
For 1 year, or one season.
Yeah, so they got it figured out.
Got it all figured out, yeah. So you could think of like walking into that second season thinking I can draw upon all my first season's experience, what I learned in that, and I have this all figured out.
Yeah.
There's a lot to learn.
Bit of Dunning-Kruger.
A bit of the DK effect.
It seems likely, it seems possible and probably likely that year 5 you're going to know more than year 2. In year 10 you're going to know more than year 5.
Hey, that makes sense.
And at year 2 you kind of think that you're at year 10.
Yeah, year 2 you might think you're at year 10.
So in today's episode, we're going to do some of what we usually do. We're going to cover a bit of the history of the Dunning-Kruger effect, how it works, and then for those that do fall into this, unlike us, strategies to avoid falling into the Dunning-Kruger effect.
Yeah, you'll want to listen to us because we got this nailed. Yeah. I don't even know what it feels like to be in the Dunning-Kruger effect.
We have never overestimated our skills.
No, not Dunning-Krugering out in the world.
You know what's funny is just as we're saying this right now that we've never overestimated our skills reminds me of the single time that we've skied together. And
what comes to mind?
You came shot out of a cannon from a sideshow. And the booter just Lifted you a little funky.
Dude, that snow was, that's what I remember.
Did some cartwheels.
Yeah, man.
Across
like
the
a
mountain.
backflip.
Cartwheels. It looked cool. It looked like you'd been shot out of a snow cannon.
I think that moment felt like I was.
Oh, dude.
Yeah. Honestly, don't even know what happened.
Dude. Yeah. So let's jump into the history. What you got for us?
Yeah, so the history of the Dunning Kruger effect, we'll try to just focus on the actual study that sort of laid the foundation for this idea. And it was produced by David Dunning and Justin Kruger.
Is that where they get the name Dunning Kruger?
That's my best guess, but I'm not totally sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm going to doubt myself a little bit there.
Okay.
Yeah, so Dunning and Kruger, they were professors at Cornell University.
#go.
Officially, Cornell does not have a mascot. However, generations of Cornellians have come to know and love the Big Red Bear as Cornell's unofficial mascot.
Sounds about right. That seems on brand for Cornell.
Yeah, I think they're all bad.
A little mysterious.
Yeah. So #go Big Red Bears, maybe?
Yeah.
Who apparently the name of the Big Red Bear is Touchdown.
Okay. So David Dunning, Justin Kruger, 1999 at Cornell.
Yeah, and their whole thing was they wanted to test and understand whether beginners or incompetent people were unaware of their incompetence. Just such a funny way of putting that. It was kind of pejorative.
Yeah. I actually could see, that would be a fun brainstorming session. Like, how can we test it? I wonder if one of them that day had an interaction with someone where, like, this person's clueless to how incompetent they are.
Yeah, and they think they have it all.
We should design a study to investigate that. I wonder if they invited the person that inspired the idea.
So like they got this
research participant.
They got this one in class and it's just like, this kid does not know anything. It thinks they know everything. We need to prove this.
We're going to design a whole study just so we can get this person there and then see the result.
Yeah. And then we'll just label him as Dunning-Krugering all over himself through his program.
On Facebook.
So
how did they test it?
Yeah, so to test this effect, they gave 45 undergraduate students, one who maybe included that student we're talking about, and they just gave them a 20-question logic test that drew upon both English grammar and appreciation of humor. And they would ask participants to rate their own performance in two different ways. Just real quick, typically the Dunning-Kruger effect is measured by comparing a self-assessment versus an objective performance.
Okay.
So the questions that they would ask first was, how many questions did you get correct? And then the second one they would ask is, how did you compare with other students who took the test?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is a good design.
Not too bad, right? And so this type of question would require to make guesses about how others performed and is subject to a common mistake. And that's the common mistake is most of us think we're better than average. Mm-hmm. Kind of a bias.
Yeah. Everyone's
Not
running
wrong.
around above average, which means the average is above average.
Oh, dang.
That's real
It all
meta.
leads back to above average.
Real meta.
Oh, dang. Does this relate to you in the back room, figuring out the meaning of life?
Yeah. Got it all dialed.
We're out just going through the world above
Because
average.
I'm above average.
Yeah.
But when you were sitting in your office, you were figuring it out too, and you are above average as well.
Yeah.
Everybody's above average.
Okay. After the test, they collected the responses to the two questions, and then the researchers would split the participants into 4 quadrants based on the performance. So like your bottom quadrant, your bottom middle, top.
Okay.
Right. And so they found that on the bottom quadrant, people on average would get 10 out of 20 correct.
Oof.
Yeah. So
50. Solid 50.
a solid 50. Yeah, we're flipping a coin.
Okay.
On the top quadrant, they would get an average 17 out of 20.
Dang.
So a little better. And both estimated going in the desired direction there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What did they both? So both groups estimated they got the same number correct.
Yeah, both groups estimated they got 14 out of 20, right? So for the bottom group, they were overestimating their performance by 20%, and then the top group was underestimating their performance by 15%.
Yeah.
Something that's so interesting is when comparing these ratings against other participants, the results were much more striking. So the lowest quadrant would estimate that they did better than 62% of other people. And then the highest scoring quadrant would estimate that they did better than 68% of other
That's
people.
interesting.
Yeah.
So they estimated they got the same number correct.
Yeah.
And they both estimated they did better than the average number. And even though they estimated they got lower, they underestimated their actual performance, the highest quadrant still estimated they performed better than a majority.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
This is really interesting.
They're pretty close numbers, right?
Yeah.
62% and 68%.
Yeah. And 10 and 17 are two very different scores.
Two very different scores. Yeah, totally. So that's a really interesting finding. So by definition, being in the bottom quarter means that at best you will score better than 25% of people, and then on average better than just 12.5%, right? Mm-hmm. Estimating you did better than 62% of your peers while scoring better than 12.5% of them gives a whopping 49.5 percentage point overestimation.
Oh, dear. Yeah. Oh, dear.
So there's a huge overestimation happening there. And then the measures how students compared themselves to others rather than to their actual scores is where the Dunning Kruger effect arose. And so it essentially grossly exaggerates the overestimation of the bottom quarter and seems to show that Dunning Kruger titled their paper that the least skilled students were unskilled and unaware. Double whammy.
Yeah. It's a good thing we're covering this, like to have such a professional, proficient, effective, high caliber podcast cover such a good topic.
Yeah, skilled and aware podcast unit covering this topic.
What was the title of the paper again? Oh, that's right. Least skilled students were unskilled and unaware.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So essentially that's where the Dunning-Kruger effect arose from, was looking at the participants' self-assessment, comparing that to how they perceived other people to do.
Ah, yeah. What are like real-time examples? So, if it's like people overestimating, and it happens that the people that are in the lowest quadrant had the biggest gap in what they're overestimating. Mm-hmm. What are examples of how this plays out?
Yeah, one way, one example that came up was I think it was in 2007 or 2008, but like the housing crisis. Mm-hmm. And so essentially there were some people making disastrous decisions due to overconfidence. Right. And the assumption was that housing prices will always rise. And then they overestimated the market stability and then basically just underestimated or threw away all the warning signs from experts that this was going to go that way.
So then it leads to people in situations where what they're estimating is way above an actual value of something.
Right. And another one's the Titanic.
How so?
This boat is not sinkable.
Yeah. The unsinkable
Titanic.
Molly Brown. Shout out our theater listeners.
Yeah. Shout out to another form of nerds. We covered the research nerds last time. Yeah.
He's putting them on blast.
Yeah, dude, everyone. We're all nerds. Just depends on what you nerd out on. Shout out to the theater folks.
So the unsinkable Titanic.
So the unsinkable Titanic, essentially they overestimated the ability to handle damage, which resulted in insufficient emergency means. And people who are designing the boat overestimated the design itself. Mm-hmm. Tend to underestimated the risks to the design.
Yeah. Okay, so two examples that had catastrophic consequences. Some people were fighting for their basic needs after the housing crisis, and then obviously people fighting for their lives with the sinking of the Titanic.
Yeah, totally. So it could point to ways in which the Dunning-Kruger effect maybe pinned or was the underpinning for some decisions that were made that resulted in some disastrous consequences.
Yeah, and the only silver lining to those two examples is that the Titanic is your favorite movie.
It is. Yeah, I'm a big Leo fan. Yeah, some pretty key moments in that film.
What is it? It's like daily I see you in the back saying, I'm the king of the world.
Yeah, you saw me on the couch the other day in my arms. Outspread.
Yeah. Arms wide open.
Yeah. You were contemplating the meaning of the world, and I was just on the front of the Titanic.
You were on the front of the couch holding your arms wide saying, will someone hold me? While I say the phrase, I'm the king of the world.
I will say it was a letdown to go unheld in that moment.
Yeah. Well, it's a matter of perspective. So I have some follow-up questions then.
Yeah.
So kind of just exploring how it works. So here's the first one. Why does the Dunning-Kruger effect happen? So why is it that people that are in that lowest quadrant, why do they follow into the overestimation?
Yeah, that's a really good question, right? Essentially, one thing that we've found, or the research has found through it, is referred to as the double burden problem. And it essentially means, this kind of goes to what Dunning-Kruger had said, lack of skill and lack of awareness. But a lack of skill also means lack of awareness of one's incompetence. It's kind of summed up in that, like, you don't know what you don't know.
Okay. Yeah. So literally the lack of knowledge an individual has about the amount of skills that go into it means that they can't accurately estimate how many skills they've acquired compared to how many there are.
Yeah, totally. Or have been unexposed to maybe complexities or nuances of situations that would come over time. And so without that, they would never expect or have learned about those.
Okay.
Yeah. So that'd be one, is that we don't know what we don't know.
Okay. And then is it just that? Are there other reasons that people with that limited capacity actually overestimate that widely?
Yeah, so a couple more reasons. One is that early competence feels like mastery. And so confidence associated with first learning something tends to be high. And again, unaware of the full picture, so that people would fall into the belief that we've grasped more than we really have. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so once you pick up that new skill, it's kind of like, I got this.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so interesting to learn about this because, like, I put it into the practical example, like when we first learned podcasting 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Right from the jump, it just clicked, made sense. It was easy.
We had it.
Every time, remember, we would record, and every time that I'd hook the gear up, get things going, is like super smooth, super easy, super straightforward.
Yeah, that goes different than how I remember it. Sitting with people, watching us fumble through, trying to hook things up or troubleshoot both computer, software, and hardware issues with cords and microphones. But
pretty much every time, all the time.
And then just trying to entertain the person, like doing a little dog and pony show over here.
That was your role.
Yeah, I would always fall into the role of trying to keep the person captive and entertained.
While I'm cursing under my breath, trying to get the software and the hardware going.
Exactly. Yeah. That's how I remember it. But part of me also remembers, I was surprised to learn that when was our first edit we even made to a podcast? Like last episode?
Oh, yeah, that we've never needed edits.
Never even had an edit.
Yeah, one take. They call us a one-take unit.
I think someone, with that one-take unit, someone referred to us as a biggie in the booth.
Biggie in the booth, one take.
One take, Dan's like a biggie in the booth.
Yeah. So early competence feels like mastery to people. So people don't know how many skills are left to acquire. Mm-hmm. People develop some skill, and that can feel like mastery, even though they're just kind of on the entry level. Mm-hmm. What's the other factor that informs this?
Yeah, and then the third factor here is that we tend to compare ourselves to other beginners. So there's some assumptions baked into here. The first one is that others are where we are in terms of learning or exposure to something, and that we also fall into that idea that we overestimate where we lie. Mm-hmm. So we tend to think that we're above average.
So we assume that that the other beginners have the same amount of exposure. Sometimes we actually have more, while also we're overestimating how we're performing in that moment.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yep. So those would be some of the underpinnings for why this happens.
Yeah. What's the flip side? What's the flip side of the Dunning Kruger effect? Those people that are scoring 17s and estimating 14s.
Yeah, totally. So this goes back to another really fine episode that was unedited because it was a biggie in the booth product that we did on imposter syndrome.
Oh, yeah, we covered imposter syndrome.
Totally, and that's where competent people will often underestimate themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they'll feel maybe nervous or anxious about what they do know or what they don't know in a sense, and will underestimate what they do know. It would be the idea that the more you learn, the more you understand that you don't know. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So then how do we avoid this? With the other cognitive bias shows that we've done thus far in our series, we talk about what are strategies to get out of this mental shortcut.
Yeah. Totally. I think we could ping pong some ideas here, huh?
Let's do it.
First thing that comes to mind is just building self-awareness. One of those things would be seeking feedback from experts and peers and consistently engaging in both self-assessment and reflection.
Like me in the back room?
Yeah. Reflection different than rumination. Yeah, so one of those things with self-awareness, just like we're saying there, would be to commit to lifelong learning, right? Surrounding yourself with people who are experts in your field or have a lot more knowledge who can share that for you. There's the example of the mountain of ignorance or the valley of humility. And the mountain of ignorance would say, when you take those initial steps up the mountain, it's kind of like, oh, this is easy. I got this. I don't see why experts make this so complicated. I watched a couple of videos. I could probably do this myself. And so the longer that you climb the mountain of ignorance, kind of find yourself at a place where it's like underestimating essentially what you know.
At some point. So in climbing the mountain, at some point you kind of feel tired or it's become difficult due to the accumulation of pushing up the mountain.
Continuing to go, yeah. So you find yourself in the valley of humility, and there might be recognition of like, wow, there's a lot more to this than I thought. Or the more that I learn, the more I realize I don't know, which is a really powerful place to operate from.
Okay, so like a second one is to ask quality questions. And some of the characteristics of a quality question, one may ask, what do you mean by ask quality questions? One may say, ask better questions. And I would say ask quality questions.
Yeah. You wouldn't want to be like demeaning or like condescending. You would just say, let's start from a place of asking quality questions.
Quality questions.
Yeah. Not do better.
It's not like a valence, like a better or worse thing.
Yeah.
It's just quality.
Just quality. Just boom.
Qualitatively better questions.
Oh, dang. Oh, dang. I'm going to have to sit with that for a moment.
So the characteristics of asking quality questions are having a growth mindset, which means that a growth mindset is opposite to a fixed mindset. And a fixed mindset is where you view things as static, meaning that you've acquired what information is available about this thing, and you're ignorant to any dynamism or evolution in that thing. A growth mindset is being open to the nuance, the dynamism, and the evolution of that experience, that idea, that concept, that knowledge. And so you have to ask questions that come from a place of knowing there's more to know about this thing. And secondly, to ask quality questions, you have to engage in curiosity-driven conversations. So sometimes this is one that can be challenging for me at times. I actually sometimes remind myself internally, like, go into this conversation wondering what's going to happen or what's going to go on. Like, have a curiosity about it, not a developed idea about the thing.
Gotcha.
And so reminding yourself to explore what you don't know rather than fall back on developing a hypothesis of what you do know is how you help to ask quality questions.
All right. Dang, okay. I'm still kind of stuck on the ask qualitatively better question. My mind can't move past that.
What else we got for strategies to overcome this?
Yeah, third way is to stay open to criticism. And I think this kind of piggybacks on what you're talking about, is to approach conversations and feedback with openness. Particularly as a beginner, you want to like prove your competence, right? Like you want to show that you're worth something, you can do something. And so feedback can act as a threat. So we talk about learning to separate ego from learning itself. If you can kind of separate yourself from that, wanting to prove yourself or show that you know it all, you then have a better opportunity or better chance of remaining open to further learning. Yeah.
And then we have one last strategy. So the fourth one being recognize expertise in others. So this is kind of like you'll never be the best at everything. Even when you do develop skills or you do have a substantial amount of knowledge on a topic, there are going to be other people that may have expertise in aspects of that thing.
Yeah.
Or people around you, your peer groups, that may have qualities that differ and are really valuable to observe and learn from.
Yeah, totally. I think you mentioned this a moment ago, but that exists in process kind of always, right? It's not like you necessarily reach that place and you have it. Even in your own development as an expert, you can continue to learn, continue to challenge your own assumptions, beliefs, knowledge.
Yeah. So with those strategies, what's the conclusion? What's the key takeaways for today?
Key takeaways. Man, we're wrapping this mug up, huh? Everyone is susceptible to the Dunning Kruger effect.
Other than
podcast
unit.
Oh, the podcast unit. Yeah. Other than us, of course. But awareness helps. So it's good to be aware that everyone else other than us falls into this cognitive bias.
Yeah, it's helpful for us to be aware that many people fall into the Dunning-Kruger effect.
Yeah, so it's really just an opportunity for us to try to practice understanding what that might be like. Which is hard.
Develop empathy.
Yeah, really hard.
It would be hard to not know what you don't know.
Totally. Can't imagine what that's like.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that'd be one thing. Awareness helps. Another is just encouragement to keep learning. Stay humble in wherever you're at, particularly when learning a new trade or a new skill, going through school, something to that effect, is to try to operate out of that place of humility and openness to knowledge and feedback.
Yeah. Hey, so could we, I'm curious, could we incorporate like an interactive poll?
Oh man, you are all up on these interactivities. Man.
What if we do an interactive poll, or we could do an interactive challenge, or we could do an interactive activity.
I like interactive activity is probably my favorite. We could just call it an interactivity.
Not at all redundant?
No, man, I like an interactive activity. Particularly if it's active. It's an active, interactive activity.
You know what annoys me is if people shorten it and call it an interaction. I prefer an interactive activity.
Yeah, I could see how that would be really hard for you to be okay with that shortening of the words.
Yeah. You know me.
Yeah.
The more the more words you can use to say something. Is what I always prefer.
Yeah. Any way that we can add more words to this, like what's happening right now, let's do that.
Could we do like let's do an interactive poll?
Yeah, I've been loving these IPs. Let's do it. What do you got?
Okay. Let's say, let's throw out on the socials, ask if anyone's ever realized you were wrong about something you thought that you knew, and share an example of that.
Okay.
I'd love to hear the examples.
Yeah, for sure. If I could piggyback on that, I'd also just like to know what that's like. Like, share your example and what is that like for you?
What emotions come up and what thoughts do you observe and what sensations do you feel in your body?
Yeah, all that. Yeah. I'm just curious, really curious about that.
Okay.
So we'll put that up on the socials and we'll get the IP going.
Yeah.
Okay.
Why don't you take us out by shouting us out?
No doubt. You can always find us on the interwebs, www.beyondflag.com, flag spelled
FLG.
Yeah, we're out here on Instagram, beyond_flag. So we got many other shows on our podcast channel. We got Beyond Flag, where we interview people from around town, talking about what connects them to the community and creating familiarity. We got Crossing the Chasm with Brian C. Peterson. We got The Build Up, which featured Molly Seidel and her build up to the Olympic trials. And then we have Land Defenders with Matea Getz and the Sierra Club.
Yeah. And we'd like to do a shout out to Compost Crowd, sponsoring this episode and other episodes. Hit them up. Join the crowd.
Join the crowd. You can find them at Compost Crowd on the IG.
Yeah. All right. Take care.
Lovies.
Why were you laughing a second ago?
I changed a word there that it actually said ask better questions. And I remember changing that because I was like, dude, Dan will have a heyday with this. So I put quality instead of better.
That's quality.
Like, do better. Ask better questions.
Yeah. So you don't want to ask you don't want to phrase this in like a valence way, like better and worse.
Yeah.
So to get out of the valence system, you say, I'm going to ask qualitatively better questions.
Jeez. My mind's a pretzel. Just wrapped every which direction right now. Dan Phillips, everyone. The smartest guy I know.